Hello everyone, I hope you're doing well. The news as of late has been especially difficult to deal with, especially with the Trump administration's ridiculous support for the so-called Department of Government Efficiency. But recently I was disturbed by an article in the New York Times showing that Vice President J.D. Vance had gone to Germany and met with the AfD's co-leader Alice Weidel. He also seemingly lambasted other German leaders for refusing to work with the Alternative for Germany, despite their clearly bigoted politics.
Now, we're at the point, of course, that the situation has gotten so bad that this December, Romania straight up canceled the results of a presidential election based on the flimsy suspicions of an intelligence agency and enormous pressure from its continental neighbors. Now, as I understand it, the argument was that Russian disinformation had infected the Romanian elections. But I'd ask my European friends to have some perspective. You can believe it's wrong for Russia to buy social media advertisements to influence your elections. We certainly do. You can condemn it on the world stage even. But if your democracy can be destroyed with a few $100,000 of digital advertising from a foreign country, then it wasn't very strong to begin with. Now, the good news is that I happen to think your democracies are substantially less brittle than many people apparently fear. And I really do believe that allowing our citizens to speak their mind will make them stronger still. Which, of course, brings us back to Munich, where the organizers of this very conference have banned lawmakers representing populist parties on both the left and the right from participating in these conversations. Now, again, we don't have to agree with everything or anything that people say. But when when political leaders represent an important constituency, it is incumbent upon us to at least participate in dialogue with them. Now, to many of us on the other side of the Atlantic, it looks more and more like old entrenched interests hiding behind ugly Soviet-era words like misinformation and disinformation, who simply don't like the idea that somebody with an alternative viewpoint might express a different opinion or, God forbid, vote a different way or, even worse, win an election.
As you can see, Vance doesn't directly mention the AfD, but his statement and meeting with its leadership make his intentions clear. The AfD is increasingly growing in Germany and could hold extensive power in the next election. For those unfamiliar with the AfD, it is a far-right extremist group that has repeatedly downplayed the Holocaust and Holocaust history. The AfD, which was founded in 2013, is the largest far-right and anti-Semitic political party in Germany since the Nazi Party rose to power in the 1930s. Its anti-immigrant and anti-Islamic bent has played off the frustrations of Germans, gaining traction with each passing year. In reaction, the major parties of Germany have established a firewall of opposition, refusing to work with the AfD. It is in this context that Vance's absurd speech comes into the picture, and it is why we mustn't take Vance's comments about free speech at face value. This was an attempt to endorse the AfD and its rising power. The AfD isn't simply a rising force within conservatism, as Vance portrays them as. They are incredibly bigoted and have a long history of downplaying the significance of the Nazis. In one instance in 2018, AfD co-leader Alexander Gahlen referred to the Nazi era as, quote, just bird shit in more than 1,000 years of successful German history, unquote. In response to the outcry that these comments created, AfD spokesman Christian Luth posted, quote, bird shit is what I think of the Nazi era. Rather than insulting the Nazi era, these comments are part of a longer, more insidious attempt to downplay the role Nazism played in German history. The party's leader in the eastern region of Thuringia, Bjorn Hawk, has called for a, quote, 180-degree turnaround in how the country deals with its Nazi history, and has disparaged Holocaust memorials as, quote, monuments of shame. Now, I don't know who needs to hear this, but Germany should be ashamed of the Holocaust. You don't get to kill 6 million Jewish people and countless others and expect to not have some sort of cultural shame for genocide. And this isn't to say that modern-day Germans are responsible for the actions of their predecessors. They're not. But if you want to make sure that something like the Holocaust doesn't happen again, acknowledging what happened and appreciating the scope of the violence is critical. It is also worth noting that same leader has been convicted not once but twice of knowingly using Nazi slogans. Another one of their candidates, Alina Ruhn, an AfD candidate for the German parliament, posted an image of Adolf Hitler which read, quote, missing since 1945. Adolf, please call home. Germany needs you, the German nation. Despite overtly supporting Adolf Hitler, Ruhn currently sits as a member of the state parliament of Bavaria and has not been expelled from the AfD. In fact, the AfD is so extreme that the French far-right party, National Rally, now refuses to work with the AfD thanks to comments made by the AfD's Maximilian Krah, saying that not all SS members were criminals. I doubt I need to explain this, but the SS were the worst of the Nazi Party. They committed atrocities and helped carry out the murder of 6 million Jewish people, along with millions of other innocent men, women, and children. Nobody should be supporting a political party that engages in this kind of downplaying of atrocities. Despite this clear and present red line, Elon Musk has publicly endorsed them, saying, "Only the AfD can save Germany." Unquote. Elon even gave a speech at an AfD rally in which he stated that nobody should be ashamed of who they are, and that the ancestors' sins should not be passed on to their descendants.
Well, first of all, I wanted to really say that I'm very excited for the AfD, and I think you're really the best hope for Germany. I think some things that something I think that is just very important is that people take pride in Germany and being German. This is very important. It's okay to be proud to be German. This is a very important principle. I think there's frankly too much of a focus on past guilt, and we need to move beyond that. Children should not be guilty of the sins of their parents, or even let alone their parents, their great-grandparents, maybe even.
The thing that Elon and a lot of these AfD candidates and officials don't seem to care about is that German Holocaust history isn't about guilt for current Germans. It's about preventing such a horrible event like the Holocaust from happening again. By educating the people about the dangers of the far right and prejudice, German educators hope to prevent another Holocaust. Their goal is not to humiliate the German people, but to warn them about the dangers of their past and potentially their future. The only way these people can look at these historical teachings and say this garbage is by ignoring reality and trying to get people to do the same. By getting the German people to forget the past, Elon and the AfD can downplay their own prejudices and put them into practice. And considering Elon and Alice Weidel, who again leads the AfD, are pushing the idea that Hitler was a communist, it is increasingly clear that this is their goal.
Since I'm a economist, I would like to shed some light on the idea, when we talk about Hitler, on the idea of the National Socialists. Back then, during the Third Reich, the National Socialists, as the word says, they were socialists.
Yeah,
Adolf
very much
Hitler
so.
considered, yeah.
They nationalized industries like crazy.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
He was a communist, and he considered himself as a socialist. So what they did, they state funded then the private companies, and then they asked for taxes, huge taxes, and then also wait a second, I need to ask the word now, verstaatlichen. Yeah, nationalize the entire industry. You said that before, and the biggest success after that terrible era in our history was to label Adolf Hitler as right and conservative. He was exactly the opposite. He wasn't a conservative. He wasn't a libertarian. He was a communist, socialist guy.
Aside from the fact that Hitler privatized a lot of industries such as mining, steel, banking, and railways, the idea of Hitler being a communist is an absurdity. For one, Hitler vehemently opposed communism and Marxist thinking, so much so that he directly denounced it in a speech before over 600 business people in the city of Dusseldorf in January of 1932. In that speech, he accused Marxists of being the source of Germany's ills, although it is worth noting that in this speech, he never mentions Jewish people being behind this supposed conspiracy theory, likely because he would have lost his support at that point if he did. As Richard Evans explains in his book, The Coming of the Third Reich, quote, the Nazis declared they would scrape away foreign and alien incrustations on the German body politic, ridding the country of communism, Marxism, Jewish liberalism, cultural Bolshevism, feminism, sexual liberationism, cosmopolitanism, the economic and power political burdens imposed by Britain and France in 1919, Western democracy, and much else. They would lay bare the true Germany, unquote. When Dachau concentration camp first opened in March of 1933, some of the first people put into the camps were social democrats and communists. This idea that Hitler loved communism or held to communist principles is ridiculous. This isn't to say that the Nazis were full-blown libertarians or interested in capitalism's preservation. They weren't. Rather, they believed that the natural order of things lay in social Darwinism and that Jewish people prevented the world from being as it ought to be. And if taking publicly owned industries and letting them fall into the hands of business tycoons helped them gain power, so be it. So long as the businessmen weren't Jewish and they were loyal to the cause, the Nazis didn't care. They were bigots and anti-Semites more than they were economists. To portray Hitler as a communist downplays the severity of his anti-Semitic social Darwinism and ignores his virulent red baiting. By reducing Hitler's politics to him not respecting private property, Vidal ignores how Nazism was based on hierarchical racism and an intense hatred and fear of perceived outsiders. The most hated of these outsiders were the Jewish people, who suffered the most. And it shouldn't surprise anybody that Vidal does this, because removing the Nazis from the right wing allows her to ignore the role of anti-immigrant propaganda in Hitler's politics and how it can overlap with hers, whether it is advocating for the deportation of migrants they deem unworthy, or the reinforcement of a quote-unquote truly German culture. Vidal benefits from distancing her party from Hitler as much as possible, and more than that, Alice Vidal has a vested personal interest in downplaying her connections to the Nazis, because her grandfather, Hans Vidal, was a Nazi judge in the Warsaw Commandant's office, and was appointed to be the chief staff judge by Adolf Hitler himself. So nobody should be surprised she is part of a party that is downplaying the Nazis. The fact of the matter is that nobody should be supporting the AfD. Least of all the United States government. There is simply no world where this is acceptable. But as it stands, we will have to wait and see if the German people reject this neo-Nazi garbage. And one can only hope Elon and J.D. Vance pay for their promotion of this fascist nonsense.